Your Honor, I'm ready to present my defense. The judge didn't even look up from his papers. He waved a dismissive hand, the gold ring on his finger catching the fluorescent courtroom lights. Sit down, child. Where's your attorney? I am the attorney, Your Honor. Now he looked up. Judge Harold Pemberton had presided over the Manhattan Criminal Court for 23 years. He'd seen everything: crooked cops, mob lawyers, defendants who represented themselves straight into prison cells. But this was new. Standing at the defense table was a girl who looked like she should be studying for her SAT, not defending a felony case. She wore a black blazer that seemed just slightly too big, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her face was smooth, unlined, impossibly young. The courtroom erupted in whispers. In the gallery, reporters leaned forward, sensing a story. The prosecutor, a barrel-chested man named Carson who'd won 87 cases in a row, actually laughed out loud. It was a sharp, barking sound that echoed off the oak-paneled walls. Judge Pemberton removed his reading glasses slowly, making a show of it. I'm sorry, did you say you're the attorney? Yes, Your Honor. How old are you? 18, Your Honor. The judge leaned back in his leather chair, which creaked under his considerable weight. He looked at the bailiff, then at the court reporter, then back at the girl. His expression was a mixture of disbelief and condescension, the kind of look adults reserve for children who announce they wanted to be astronauts or presidents. This is a criminal trial for aggravated assault. The defendant is facing 8 years in prison. You're telling me a child is going to mount his defense? She didn't flinch. Her hands rested calmly on the table in front of her, fingers interlaced. I'm licensed to practice law in the state of New York, Your Honor. My credentials are in order. I'm prepared to proceed. Carson stood, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Your Honor, this is absurd. The court can't possibly allow. I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Carson. Judge Pemberton cut him off, his voice heavy with authority. Young lady, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this court, it's not a game. Her voice was steady, clear, each word precisely articulated. And with all due respect, Your Honor, the rules of this court don't specify an age requirement for licensed attorneys. If you refuse to allow me to represent my client, I'll have grounds for mistrial based on denial of counsel. The judge's face flushed red. In the front row of the gallery, a journalist's pen moved frantically across her notepad. The bailiff shifted uncomfortably near the door. Even the court reporter's fingers paused over her stenotype machine. Is that a threat? Pemberton's voice dropped to a dangerous register. It's a statement of fact, Your Honor. For a long moment, no one moved. The air conditioning hummed. Somewhere in the hallway, a phone rang. The defendant, a 24-year-old construction worker named Marcus Chen, sat frozen beside his impossibly young lawyer, his eyes wide with terror. He'd been told his public defender couldn't make it, that a replacement was being sent. He'd expected someone older, experienced, maybe even bored with routine cases. Not this. Not a girl who looked younger than his kid sister. Judge Pemberton finally spoke, his words dripping with barely concealed contempt. Fine. Let's get this circus over with. Mr. Carson, call your first witness. The prosecutor smiled, sensing blood in the water. The state calls Officer Michael Rodriguez. What followed was textbook prosecution. Rodriguez took the stand, a 12-year veteran of the NYPD, with a chest full of commendations and the easy confidence of someone who'd testified hundreds of times. He described responding to a disturbance at a bar in Hell's Kitchen, finding the victim with a broken nose and fractured eye socket, Marcus Chen standing over him with bloody knuckles. Carson walked him through it slowly, methodically, building his case brick by brick. The weapon, Marcus's fists. The injuries, severe enough to require reconstructive surgery. The witnesses, 3 patrons who saw everything. The confession, Marcus admitting he threw the punch. When Carson finished, he turned to the defense table with a smug expression. Your witness, counselor. The girl stood. She picked up a yellow legal pad covered in neat handwriting and approached the witness stand. Officer Rodriguez watched her with barely concealed amusement. In the jury box, 12 New Yorkers, construction workers, teachers, retirees, looked skeptical. One older woman in the back row actually shook her head. Officer Rodriguez, you arrived at the scene at approximately 10:40 p.m. on March 15th? That's correct. And you observed my client standing over the victim? Yes. Standing. Not crouching, not kneeling, not bending down. Standing. Rodriguez shifted slightly. Well, yes. Standing. She flipped a page on her legal pad. According to your report, the victim was lying on the ground, correct? Yes. Face up or face down? Face up. And the blood? Where was the blood located? Carson started to stand, then sat back down. The question was basic, procedural, but something in the way she asked it made him uneasy. Rodriguez answered slowly. On his face. Around his nose and eye. Was there blood on the floor? Some. Yes. How much? I don't understand. How much blood was on the floor, Officer Rodriguez? A puddle? Drops? Spatter? Drops. Maybe a small puddle. She nodded, making a note. Her pen moved quickly across the paper. And my client's hands. You said they were bloody? That's right. Both hands. Rodriguez paused. This was the first real hesitation, the first crack in his confident testimony. In the gallery, the journalist stopped writing and looked up. I believe so. You believe so, or you know so. Both hands were bloody. Are you sure? Yes. She walked back to the defense table, set down her legal pad, and picked up a manila folder. From it, she extracted a photograph, an 8x10 glossy that she handed to the bailiff, who passed it to Rodriguez. This is Exhibit 73 from the prosecution's own discovery. Officer Rodriguez, do you recognize it? He looked at the photo. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Yes, it's a photo from the scene. And whose hands are those? The defendant's. Marcus Chen's hands, taken by crime scene investigators approximately 30 minutes after your arrival. Can you describe what you see? Rodriguez stared at the photo. The courtroom waited. Judge Pemberton leaned forward slightly. The right hand is bloody. The left hand appears clean. The left hand appears clean, she repeated, her voice carrying clearly through the silent room. So when you testified under oath just now that both hands were bloody, you were mistaken. Carson shot to his feet. Objection. Counsel is badgering the witness. Overruled. Judge Pemberton's voice had lost some of its earlier contempt. He was watching the girl now with something that might have been curiosity. She turned back to Rodriguez. Officer, in your 12 years of experience, if someone punched another person hard enough to break their nose and fracture their orbital bone, would you expect to see blood on the hand that delivered the blow? Yes. And if they used both fists in a sustained attack, as the prosecution suggested in opening statements, would you expect to see blood on both hands? Rodriguez said nothing. Officer Rodriguez. Generally, yes. Yet the photographic evidence shows only one bloody hand, the right hand, which raises a question, doesn't it? Carson was on his feet again. Your Honor, is there an actual question here? Or is counsel simply making speeches? The girl didn't even glance at Carson. She kept her eyes locked on Rodriguez. Officer, when you arrived at the scene, did you ask the victim what happened? He was unconscious. So that's a no. Did you ask any of the witnesses what they saw before the physical altercation? The assault happened. Before the assault, Officer Rodriguez. Did you ask what led up to it? There were statements taken. By you? At the scene? Or later, by other officers? Rodriguez's composure was cracking. He shifted in his seat, glanced at Carson, then back at the girl. Later. By detectives. So you arrived, saw my client standing over an unconscious man, saw blood, and immediately assumed my client was the aggressor. The evidence. What evidence? Her voice rose slightly, not quite a shout but commanding enough that everyone in the courtroom sat up straighter. You saw an unconscious man and a standing defendant. You photographed one bloody hand. You didn't interview witnesses at the scene. You didn't ask about what happened before the injury. You made an assumption based on visual observation and arrested my client without conducting a thorough investigation. Carson was objecting again, his voice loud, but Judge Pemberton waved him quiet. The judge was leaning forward now, his elbows on the bench, watching the young attorney with intense focus. She pulled another document from her folder. Officer Rodriguez, I'm showing you the bar's security footage, time-stamped 9:58 p.m., 42 minutes before you arrived. The prosecution provided this in discovery. Can you describe what you see? Rodriguez took the printout, studied it. His face paled slightly. The victim appears to be grabbing the defendant's shirt, he said quietly. Grabbing, or perhaps pulling. Pulling him off a bar stool. It's hard to tell from a still image. There's video too, officer. Would you like me to play it for the court? Judge Pemberton interjected. Actually, I would like to see that video, counselor. She moved to the evidence cart, retrieved a laptop, and connected it to the courtroom's display system with practiced efficiency. The screen flickered to life, showing grainy black and white footage of a crowded bar. She pressed play. On screen, Marcus Chen sat on a bar stool, nursing a beer. A larger man, the victim, though no one would have called him that yet, approached from behind. Words were exchanged, though there was no audio. The larger man leaned in close, aggressive. Marcus turned away. The man grabbed Marcus's shoulder, spun him around. More words. Then the man grabbed Marcus's shirt with both hands and yanked him off the stool. Marcus stumbled, caught himself against the bar. The man drew back his left fist. The girl paused the video. Officer Rodriguez, what do you see here? His voice was barely audible. The victim appears to be throwing a punch. The victim. Interesting choice of words. She let that hang in the air for a moment, then pressed play again. On screen, the large man's fist flew toward Marcus. At the last second, Marcus ducked. The punch sailed over his head and connected solidly with the brass rail of the bar. The man's face contorted in pain. Marcus, operating on pure instinct, threw a single right-handed punch that caught the man in the face. The man went down hard, his head bouncing off the floor. The girl stopped the video. The courtroom was absolutely silent. She turned to face the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, what you just witnessed is called self-defense. Under New York Penal Law, Section 35.15, a person may use physical force upon another person when they reasonably believe such physical force is necessary to defend themselves from what they reasonably believe to be the use or imminent use of unlawful physical force. Judge Pemberton found his voice. Counselor, you'll have time to argue law during closing statements. Of course, Your Honor. I'm simply clarifying what the video depicts. She turned back to Rodriguez. Officer, you arrested my client for assault, correct? Yes. But you never saw this video before making the arrest? The video was obtained later. So you arrested him based on your observation at the scene. You saw a man standing over another man. You made an assumption. You put an innocent person in handcuffs, took him to jail, and charged him with a felony that could destroy his life. All because you didn't do your job thoroughly. Carson was shouting objections. Judge Pemberton was banging his gavel. But the damage was done. The truth exposed like a nerve. In the jury box, faces had changed from skeptical to thoughtful. The older woman in the back was nodding slowly. The girl returned to the defense table, her movements unhurried, almost casual. She sat down, placed her hands flat on the table, and waited for the chaos to subside. When Judge Pemberton finally restored order, his face was flushed, his earlier smugness completely gone. Does the defense have any more questions for this witness? His voice carried a note that hadn't been there before. It might have been respect. Just one, Your Honor. She stood again. Officer Rodriguez, when you arrested Marcus Chen, did he resist? No. Did he argue? Protest his innocence? No. He went quietly? Yes. Because he's a good person who respects authority and believed the justice system would reveal the truth. He had faith that the evidence would speak for itself. He trusted that officers like you would conduct thorough investigations, that prosecutors would seek justice rather than convictions, that judges would ensure fair trials. She paused, let those words resonate. That faith was misplaced, wasn't it? Officer Rodriguez. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. No further questions. The prosecution's case unraveled quickly after that. Carson called his 3 witnesses, the bar patrons who'd seen the punch but not what preceded it. Under cross-examination, the girl dismantled each one methodically. Had they seen the victim grab Marcus first? No. Had they seen the victim throw the first punch? No. Had they been drinking that night? Yes. How much? Enough to blur details. Enough to make assumptions. By the time Carson rested his case, the narrative had completely shifted. The victim was now an aggressor. Marcus Chen was a man who defended himself from assault. The prosecutor, sensing disaster, requested a recess to confer with his superiors. Judge Pemberton granted it, but his expression suggested he knew how this would end. During the break, reporters mobbed the hallway. The girl remained at the defense table, reviewing her notes, preparing for the defense's case. Marcus sat beside her, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." She didn't look up from her papers. "Don't thank me yet, we still have work to do." But Marcus could see it in her eyes, the quiet confidence, the certainty. She'd already won. The rest was just procedure. When court reconvened, Carson stood slowly. He looked like a man who'd aged 10 years in 30 minutes. "Your Honor, after reviewing the evidence presented by the defense, the state moves to dismiss all charges against Marcus Chen." The gallery erupted. Judge Pemberton banged his gavel repeatedly, calling for order. But he was smiling slightly. Not a big smile. Judicial dignity required restraint, but a smile nonetheless. "Mr. Chen, you're free to go. This court apologizes for the ordeal you've endured." Marcus stood, swaying slightly, his face a mask of disbelief and relief. The girl gathered her papers calmly, stacking them neatly in her folder. She moved like someone who'd done this 1,000 times, though everyone in the room knew she couldn't have. Judge Pemberton cleared his throat. "Counselor, if I could have a word before you leave." She approached the bench. The judge gestured for Carson to join them. When they were close enough for private conversation, Pemberton leaned forward, his voice low. "I owe you an apology. I judged you before you'd said a word. That was wrong, and it was beneath this court's dignity." She met his eyes steadily. "Apology accepted, Your Honor. May I ask where you went to law school?" "Yale. I graduated last month." Carson's eyes widened. "You graduated last month? How's that possible? I started college at 13, finished my undergraduate degree at 15, law school at 16, passed the bar at 17. She said it matter-of-factly, without pride or false modesty, just stating facts. "I was admitted to practice on my 18th birthday 2 weeks ago." Judge Pemberton looked stunned. "And the public defender's office sent you to handle a felony assault case?" "Actually, I volunteered. When I heard Marcus's regular attorney had a family emergency, I reviewed the case file and saw the video footage the police had overlooked. I knew he was innocent. I couldn't let him go to prison because of negligent investigation." Carson spoke quietly. "You destroyed my case in less than an hour." "Your case destroyed itself, Mr. Carson. The evidence was always there. You just chose not to look for it." There was no malice in her voice, no triumph. "Just truth," stated plainly. The prosecutor looked at the floor. Judge Pemberton cleared his throat again. "What's your name, counselor? For my records." "Sarah Brennan, Your Honor." "Well, Ms. Brennan, I suspect I'll be seeing you in my courtroom again. Next time, I'll know better than to underestimate you. With respect, Your Honor, you shouldn't underestimate anyone. Justice doesn't care about appearances, age, or assumptions. It cares about truth. She turned and walked back to the defense table where Marcus waited. They gathered the remaining files together, then headed for the courtroom doors. As they passed through, the gallery erupted in whispered conversations. Reporters scrambled for their phones, already composing headlines. The journalist in the front row was frantically typing on her laptop. Outside, the courthouse steps were bathed in afternoon sunlight. News vans lined the street, cameras already turning toward the doors. But Sarah and Marcus took the side exit, avoiding the media circus. They walked 2 blocks in comfortable silence before Marcus finally spoke. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why'd you become a lawyer so young? Most people your age are just starting college. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. They passed street vendors selling pretzels and hot dogs, tourists taking selfies, business people rushing between meetings. The city hummed around them, indifferent to the small miracle that had just occurred in courtroom 7B. When I was 9, she finally said, my brother was arrested for robbery. He didn't do it, but he was 17, poor and brown. His public defender barely spoke to him, spent maybe 20 minutes on his case. He got 8 years. By the time evidence came out proving his innocence, he'd already served 4. 4 years of his life, gone. He was never the same after that. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, be better. She stopped walking, turned to face him. The system is supposed to protect people like you, like my brother. But it only works if the people running it care more about truth than convenience, more about justice than conviction rates. What happened to you today happens every day in courtrooms across this country. People get railroaded because investigators cut corners, prosecutors chase wins, and judges make assumptions. But you stopped it. This time, for you. But I'm one person, Marcus. One person in one courtroom on one day. She smiled faintly. I need to be in 1,000 courtrooms. I need to be everywhere. You can't be everywhere. No, but I can try. And maybe if I win enough cases, expose enough lazy investigations, embarrass enough prosecutors who value their records over their duty, the system will start to fix itself. Marcus reached out, shook her hand. His grip was firm, grateful. Good luck, Sarah, and thank you. Really? You're welcome. Stay out of bars for a while, okay? He laughed. The first genuine laugh in 3 months. Deal. They parted ways at the corner. Sarah headed toward the subway, her briefcase swinging at her side, just another professional in a city full of them. No one on the street looked twice at her. No one recognized her as the girl who'd just eviscerated a prosecutor and humbled a judge. But 3 hours later, when the story broke online, everything changed. The headline read, Teen Lawyer Destroys Prosecutor's Case, Frees Innocent Man. By evening, it had gone viral. Video clips from the courtroom, someone had recorded on their phone despite the rules, showed Sarah calmly cross-examining Rodriguez, her young face set in concentration as she dismantled his testimony piece by piece. The comments section exploded. Half the internet praised her brilliance. The other half questioned how someone so young could be trusted with someone's life. A few suggested the whole thing was staged, a publicity stunt. But the court records were public. The video was real, and Marcus Chen gave interviews confirming every detail. Within days, Sarah's phone never stopped ringing. Defense attorneys wanted to hire her. Law firms offered partnerships. News outlets requested interviews. A documentary crew asked to follow her. She turned down everything, declined every interview except one. A week after the trial, she appeared on a local news program. The anchor, a silver-haired woman named Patricia Chen, no relation to Marcus, asked the obvious questions. How did she become a lawyer so young? What drove her? Wasn't she scared in that courtroom? Sarah answered patiently, professionally. She talked about accelerated education, about her brother, about the failures of the justice system. But when Patricia asked what she'd say to other young people watching, Sarah's expression changed. The professionalism dropped away, replaced by raw passion. If you see injustice, don't wait until you're older to fight it. Don't wait until you have the perfect credentials or the right connections or enough experience. Don't let anyone tell you that you're too young, too inexperienced, too anything. The world needs people who care more about doing what's right than about fitting into expectations. But surely experience matters. Experience matters. Wisdom matters. But courage matters more. And you don't need a law degree to have courage. You don't need permission to stand up for what's right. Sarah leaned forward slightly, speaking directly to the camera. There are Marcus Chins everywhere. People who've been failed by a system that's supposed to protect them. Maybe you can't free them from jail, but you can fight for them in other ways. You can vote for prosecutors who care about justice over statistics. You can serve on juries and actually listen to the evidence. You can refuse to make assumptions about people based on how they look or how old they are. You sound like you're trying to start a movement. Sarah smiled. I'm trying to remind people of something they already know. Justice doesn't care about age, race, gender, or anything else. It cares about truth. And truth doesn't need decades of experience to recognize. It just needs someone brave enough to say it out loud. The interview ended. Patricia thanked her. The cameras turned off. Sarah gathered her things and left the studio, stepping out into a New York evening that sparkled with possibility. She didn't know it yet, but the interview would be viewed 17 million times in the next month. Students would quote it in class. Young lawyers would cite it as the reason they chose their career. And in courtrooms across the country, defense attorneys would think of Sarah Brennan when they considered taking that difficult case, making that risky argument, standing up to that intimidating judge. But Sarah didn't think about any of that as she rode the subway home. She thought about her next case, a wrongful eviction, a family of 4 about to lose their apartment. The landlord had money, connections, expensive lawyers. The family had nothing except the truth, and now, Sarah Brennan. She pulled out her legal pad and started making notes. The train rumbled through dark tunnels, carrying her toward whatever came next. In her briefcase, her bar certification lay folded carefully, the same document she'd slid across Judge Pemberton's bench. The ink was still fresh, the seal unscratched. It was the beginning of something, not a career. Those took decades to build, but a mission, a purpose, a war against assumptions, negligence, and the casual cruelty of a system that had forgotten it was supposed to serve justice. Not just process cases. Sarah had won one battle in Judge Pemberton's courtroom, but she understood, with the clarity that comes from watching your brother lose 4 years of his life, that the war would never truly end. There would always be another Marcus Chen, another rushed investigation, another prosecutor chasing statistics, another judge who judged too quickly. And as long as there were people who needed defending, Sarah would be there. Young, underestimated, and absolutely relentless. The train emerged from the tunnel into twilight. Through the window, the city stretched out in all directions. Millions of lives, thousands of stories, countless injustices, large and small. Sarah looked at her legal pad, at the careful notes she'd made about her next case, and smiled. She was 18 years old. She'd been a licensed attorney for 2 weeks. She'd just humiliated a veteran prosecutor and earned the respect of a judge who'd initially dismissed her as a child. And she was just getting started. The older woman from the jury, the one who'd shaken her head when Sarah first stood to cross-examine, called her that week. She'd tracked down Sarah's office number through the public defender's website. When Sarah picked up, the woman's voice crackled with emotion. I wanted to apologize. When I saw you stand up in that courtroom, I thought, this poor girl is going to get eaten alive. I judged you. I'm ashamed of that. You don't need to apologize, ma'am. Yes, I do. I spent the whole trial thinking about my granddaughter. She's brilliant, wants to be a surgeon, but she's only 16 and people keep telling her to slow down, wait her turn. I was one of those people. I told her to enjoy her childhood, that there's plenty of time for careers. But watching you, I realized I was wrong. If she has the ability and the drive, who am I to tell her to wait? Sarah felt something warm bloom in her chest. Tell your granddaughter to trust herself. The world will try to make her small, make her wait, make her doubt. Don't let it. I will. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for reminding an old woman that youth isn't weakness. They talked for 20 more minutes. The woman, whose name was Dorothy, had served on Kiasam juries for 30 years. She'd seen lawyers of every stripe, brilliant and incompetent, passionate and bored, ethical and corrupt. She told Sarah about cases she'd sat on, verdicts she still questioned, moments where justice had failed. What you did matters, Dorothy said before hanging up. Not just for Marcus, but for everyone who watched. You reminded us what the system is supposed to look like. After the call, Sarah sat in her cramped office, really just a corner of a shared space in a building that smelled like old coffee and desperation, and let herself feel proud. Not of the victory, though, that mattered, but of the ripple effects. Dorothy's granddaughter would pursue her dreams. Judge Pemberton might think twice before dismissing a young attorney. Carson might investigate more thoroughly before filing charges. Small changes, tiny victories. But they accumulated, one case at a time, one mind at a time. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Just got word. The department is investigating Rodriguez for negligent investigations. Your case started it. Thank you. She typed back. That's bigger than the dismissal. That's systemic change. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, you're going to change the world. Sarah smiled. She didn't text back. She didn't need to. Instead, she returned to her notes on the eviction case, mapping out arguments, identifying weaknesses in the landlord's position, planning her strategy. Outside, the city prepared for night. Streetlights flickered on. Office workers poured from buildings, heading home to families and lives that existed far from courtrooms and legal battles. The world kept turning, indifferent to the small revolution happening in a cramped office where an 18-year-old lawyer plotted how to save a family's home. But Sarah didn't mind the world's indifference. She didn't need applause or recognition. She just needed cases to fight, clients to defend, and the courage to keep standing up when everyone expected her to sit down. 3 months later, she'd won 7 more cases. A year later, 23. By the time she turned 20, she'd argued before the state Supreme Court and won a precedent-setting decision on self-defense law. By 25, she'd founded her own firm specializing in cases other lawyers wouldn't touch. Wrongful convictions, police misconduct, systemic injustice. But she never forgot that first case, that first moment when Judge Pemberton looked at her with contempt and she refused to flinch. That was the moment she learned the most important lesson of her career. The only thing standing between justice and injustice is someone willing to stand up. Age doesn't matter. Experience helps, but it's not essential. What matters is courage. What matters is caring more about truth than comfort. And on days when cases got too hard, when judges were too hostile, when prosecutors had too much power and clients had too little hope, Sarah would remember Marcus Chen's tear-streaked face when the charges were dismissed. She'd remember Dorothy's phone call. She'd remember her brother, released from prison but never truly free from what it had done to him. And she'd return to her office, pull out her legal pad, and start preparing for the next fight. Because that's what warriors do. They don't quit. They don't slow down. They find the next battle and they suit up, even when, especially when, everyone expects them to surrender. Sarah Brennan was 18 when she walked into Judge Pemberton's courtroom and changed the course of one man's life. But the real story wasn't about age or brilliance or even that dramatic courtroom revelation. The real story was about a choice. The choice to care when caring was inconvenient, to fight when fighting seemed futile, to believe in justice when the system made belief feel naive. That choice, made over and over again, case after case, year after year, was what defined her. Not her age, not her credentials, just her refusal to look away from injustice and shrug. The world needed more people like that. More Dorothy's granddaughters becoming surgeons at 18. More public defenders who treated each case like it mattered. More judges who judged based on evidence, not assumptions. More prosecutors who cared about truth over wins. And maybe, just maybe, if enough people made that choice, to care, to fight, to refuse to accept injustice as inevitable, the system would finally become what it was supposed to be all along. Not perfect, never perfect, but better, fairer, more worthy of the trust people like Marcus placed in it. Sarah understood she couldn't fix everything. She was one person, no matter how many cases she won. But one person could start something. One person could inspire others. One person could remind the world that change was possible if someone was brave enough to demand it. And in the end, that was enough. That had to be enough. Because the alternative, accepting injustice, staying silent, waiting for someone else to be the hero, was unthinkable. So Sarah kept fighting, kept standing up in courtrooms where she was underestimated, kept defending clients everyone else had written off, kept believing in a justice system that didn't always believe in itself. And slowly, imperceptibly, the world changed around her. Not because she was special, though she was brilliant, no denying that, but because she refused to let age, experience, or expectation define what she could accomplish. Justice didn't care about age. Sarah proved it every time she walked into a courtroom. And that was the lesson worth learning. Not that everyone should become a lawyer at 18, but that everyone should refuse to let limitations, real or imagined, stop them from doing what's right. The judge humiliated a young girl in court. Then he realized she wasn't just a girl. She was a force, a movement, a reminder that justice belongs to anyone brave enough to demand it. And she was only getting started.